So I'm here again on the Very Basics podcast. My name is Paul. I am a graduate student at Yale University. And if this is your first time, this podcast is about the Bible, about faith, about society, and everything else in between. And this morning, I have my dear friend, of course, like most of the people that come here are people that I know and interacted with over time. But I have my dear friend, Afeez, who is a biology PhD student. He's a scientist, actually. But he has a unique story and a unique perspective on interreligious faith. As somebody who grew up Muslim and then transitioned at some point to become a Christian, I thought, and I've always, been very interested on the perspective that he brings to this conversation about interreligious faith and what it means to experience two major religions in the world. So, we're going to listen to Afeez's story a little bit and then ask him some questions about what he thinks and what we can learn about the world and about our own faith through his own experience. So let's go to Afeez and have a chat with him. Welcome, Afeez, to the podcast. It is an honor to have you on the podcast and to have you share some of your own personal story and experience. And my prayer, as always, is that people listening would benefit from your journey with faith, with the world, and with the Bible, especially. So, welcome. I think it would be great for people to know just a little bit about you, but while you do that, you could chip in, your version of your story with two major religions, namely Islam and Christianity, and then like a little bit of where the Bible falls in those like two spaces, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, walk us through that.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. Nice. Thank you. I really appreciate this, and awesome, I'm glad to take this opportunity.
Nice.
My name is Afeez. I'm a PhD student. Mm-hmm. I'm in the sciences, but I have a very big interest in faith, religion, and it's both my hobby and an important aspect to my life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was raised in a Muslim household. Mm-hmm. Both my parents are Muslims, and their parents before them were also Muslims.
Nice.
Neither of my parents speak Arabic or read. They can do enough to to do the 5 daily prayers and all that.
Right. Because Arabic is like a big part of
the faith.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And because of how much interest they have in faith, they it kind of motivated them. They wanted their kids to be able to have first-hand experience, be able to understand what they the way they talk to God. Mm-hmm. So a big thing that my parent wanted growing up was for us to go to Arabic school. Mm-hmm. So I went to Arabic school.
Oh, nice.
Yes, along with my Western education until right before high school, when things became harder and with classes and stuff. So I think this going to Arabic school, like learning the language and seeing my parents that had so much faith that weren't able to speak the same language really reformed and defined how I saw faith.
Wow.
And might also have inspired some of the questions I had later about faith. But an interesting aspect of my growing up is that neither of my parents challenged or discouraged us reading the Bible or learning about other faith as well.
Interesting.
Which it's I think it's hard for anyone to do that, especially because Islam, I think one of the quotes that inspired me growing up while I was a Muslim was one that said, seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. It's attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, although then I thought it was Muhammad that said that. Now I know it's hotly debated that the Prophet actually said that, even though it might be it's a good quote.
Yeah.
And it's very frequently used in Islam.
Right.
But at this point, this is a major driver of my interests, my thirst for knowledge then, to just learn as much as possible. what's not hotly debated in Islam is that one of the first chapters that was revealed to the prophets is actually read, like read and understand better about like the
explore,
gods that created
pursue
you.
knowledge.
Yeah, pursue knowledge. Like the chapter is called Iqra. And this was a huge inspiration for me. I became a Christian around 2014, and the details of how this happened some of it remains a mystery to even me. But I became a Christian at one of like a crusade that I went to with Apostle Suleiman in Ogun State, Nigeria. And at that point in my life, I had known, I had many Christian friends around me. It wasn't the first time in my life that I had Christian around me. There were things that were happening that I can't explain to you in that time in my life,
right,
that were unique from other times. Like, it wasn't the first time in my life I was reading the Bible, but it was the first time that it was speaking to me personally. So I think that kind of describes generally how I went from being raised by a Muslim family to Christianity. When I told my parents, my mom is the more religious one. She, I don't think she was thoroughly happy about it. I don't think that would have been her first wish. Right. If not, she wouldn't have sent me to Arabic school.
Yeah.
But she was receptive of it. She was accepting, and she understood. She was willing to learn my perspective about things, and we still talk about faith now. And it gives me like a good balance of being able to talk to people that are not in my faith as well.
Yeah.
About my faith.
That's right.
Yeah.
Wow. It's a lot of landmarks, throughout the journey here. So it sounds like there's something about the importance of the Arabic language, and the people who practice a faith that requires an understanding of a particular language, and that began to form some thoughts and some questions and some things in your mind.
Yes.
And then you moved on from there, and then they're like, okay, so there's like hints in the text that you're reading. I'm guessing it's the Quran or other related Islam text that sort of nudged and encouraged you to pursue knowledge and read and explore.
Yeah.
And that exploration included the Bible, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
You probably read it a few times, but really, not really giving attention. And then one time, now it's speaking.
Yes.
To you, like you said, right?
Yeah.
It's just like a combination of so many different things. Some of it are mysterious, some of it you can remember, some of it. It's very interesting the way faith transitions, right? And this doesn't even just include, transitioning from another faith to, a completely new faith like your experience has been, but even within the same faith, right?
Yes.
I know a lot of Christians who became a different kind of Christian, just through experiences similar to yours. And like all of that is really very interesting. And that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because like transitioning from faith is not it's a common thing, but it's not a very well spoken of thing, right? People don't really talk about transition from different faiths. Anyway, that's a lot of comment on your story. But just to say, tease out the language bit a little bit for me, right? I want to learn more. Like, how did that form questions? What kinds of questions?
Yeah. One of the things that I can say inspire, motivates, but I also struggle with when I was a Muslim and now that I'm a Christian, is that not only am I those things, I'm also a black man.
Oh my God.
That grew up in Nigeria.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And Nigeria had its own original traditional religion.
Yes.
And trying to understand how these faith came into our culture and these aspects are things that raise a lot of question in my mind.
Yeah.
And some aspects of this are true for both religions.
Oh, that's
both Islam and Christianity. But my parents' faith, like how much they sought God, and the fact that they couldn't speak Arabic, which was a necessary means to communicate with the God that they loved, raised questions in my head. Questions like, God created so many languages. There was a reason he did this, but for some reason he, first of all, got to humans through just one of them.
Yeah.
That was a feeling in my mind.
Yeah.
So, if he created all these languages, why does he need us to only communicate to us in one, to him in one? Why does he only understand us through one?
Yeah.
So why can't I, in my Yoruba language, speak to God directly? This is a question that came to my head.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, like, this is a dilemma, I think, even in Christianity. Just like, for people thinking, oh yeah, Christianity, we didn't solve it, right? We only solved it with translation.
True. I this is also something that I'm only beginning to realize as well as a Christian, and then challenges me to actually explore more, understand more, and but like the more you overcome a challenge, the closer you are to knowing God and becoming closer to him. I also learned later about the original text, the difference between the Catholic and the Protestant reformers, and then this took me back to the same question.
Exactly the same thing.
Exactly the same question of how the original, the earlier faith thought that the only way for us to communicate with God was through Latin.
Yes.
And it actually was a struggle to first translate Latin to German, and like the first translations, and led to the whole war.
Yes. So probably the only difference here is Protestant Christians, or Christians in general, found a way to democratize the Christian faith through the power and technology of translation.
True.
And probably Islam. I have a English Quran on my library. Like, I read it there, but I don't think it's something that is widely accepted, even like, in like some places where Islam is practiced, some countries where Islam is practiced.
Yeah, I think people do read English Quran. The main challenge, at least for me, is that even though people read English Quran, people go to Yoruba sermons about the Quran. When people pray to God, they still pray in Arabic. You still pray, you still read the surahs, you still say words that you don't directly know what each word means. You know what the entire sentence is and what it does, but like word for word, it doesn't feel like you are directly saying what's on your mind, like how you would pray in the morning.
I hear you. I hear you. It's a legitimate question and concern, and again, like, it's truly fascinating the way your journey turned out. And like the understanding of your parents, especially your mom, and all of that is really generative and generous in that sense. But now you're a Christian, transitioned a few years ago. Definitely, it's not without challenges.
It's not.
So talk us through some of that. What does it feel like to transition from, or to have experienced two faiths, right, two religions? And what are some of the challenges now as a Christian?
Yeah, so no aspects of your life are ever like totally removed. Your experiences are still your experiences. Being a former Muslim that's a Christian still defines some of my experiences and some of the things that I do. I would say that the early transition, there are challenges from both sides of first having friends that I went to the mosque with. You can try to go back to that day when I decided, at least a couple of weeks ago, I probably went to mosque with certain friends and was still in the same space as them for a long time. So one of the challenges this first presented to me was, I had a particular friend that I used to go to mosque with, and we prayed together very frequently. He saw it almost like a personal attack, almost like a betrayal. And I think our relationship changed fundamentally after I became a Christian. And that was an important challenge because this person was important to me it was a relationship between God and me.
Yeah.
They're not holding me to God.
Yes.
I wish this is an aspect that people understand, that each person's relationship with God, you can influence, you can motivate, but like it's still their relationship with God.
Yes.
So this was a challenge on the Islam side, and this can still be a challenge with certain people that through my name, Afeez, learned that I used to be a Muslim. Some people approach it with curiosity.
Yeah.
Once you hear my story, learn about me as I am.
Yeah.
Others might see it more as like a challenge of, are there things I can tell this person to motivate them back and, like convince them back to Islam, conversation of conversion. But I also, I'm so aware of like what this poses, and like have an open mind from a perspective of, I do have friends that are Christians now that I imagine if the reverse had happened, this would also be a challenge
exactly
with them.
What I was gonna say, man.
Yeah.
It's not clean on the other side,
it's not
too.
clean on the other side either. Imagine my story was I was born in a Christian family, and I today out of faith, somehow thought that I wanted to be a Muslim. There might be Christians that stop talking to me.
Yeah.
And I don't think either the Quran or the Bible teaches this. Somehow people learn it and make these decisions, but they're not taught in either text. We're not, we're responsible for talking to people about our faith, but we're not responsible for their decisions.
That's right. That's a problem.
So, yeah. Really? Yeah, so it's that's like the main challenge on both sides. Another challenge could be that my perspectives on faith might be seen more as diluted by people that have grown up in a Christian family, especially in situations where I want to come in to clarify certain ignorance or misunderstanding about another faith. When people want to people want to make stereotypes about other religions. People want to say that this religion is this and this only. This religion is that and that only. This religion is, in quote, violent and things like that.
And I'm like, no.
I came from there. And that's not what it teaches. And, people can be this or that, not only in that religion, even in the one I'm in. People can have interpretations based on how they understand the text and their personal experiences. It's not what the religion fundamentally teaches.
Oh my God.
So my experience can be seen as diluted because it didn't grow up in a Christian background family, but like I'm understanding and I'm fine with these things.
Wow, this is really eye-opening, bro. This is like, and I'm so glad that we are talking about this because I'm sure there are experiences similar to yours out there. And I'm sure somebody's feeling affirmed, by you sharing this, especially the way you do it, trying to pinpoint the challenges that would have been if you had even stayed or if you had transitioned from the opposite side, right? And not really giving the credibility to one and saying, oh yeah, this one is that and that one is this, but trying to really assess the situation and say, yeah, it would have been the same on both sides, right? I'm not saying that Christian, like Islam folks are that, right? Christian folks could have been that too. And for sure, like, and I can give several examples of people leaving within Christianity, people leaving one denomination, one church to another church, and people feeling a certain way about it. Oh, why are you going to that church? They are this and they are that. Like we have this supersessionist way of looking at things that are not ours or like groups that we are not members of.
It seems almost like an automatic thing with humans. Is to just, every time you're within a group to find subtle differences. And then once you're within that subgroup, you find more subtle differences. Like intra-faith denomination and struggle in both religions are just as like exciting to explore as inter. Like even in the context of like wars that were fought and things like that, they're very interesting and they always exist.
Right. how I can definitely not ask you challenges without asking you like how you're trying to overcome some of these challenges. Like the one about faith dilution is really interesting to me, right? And I can imagine like how that will make you feel. Like, oh, your faith is not authentic because you didn't start out the way I started out, you know. And that sort of challenge is like wild. How are you overcoming some of these challenges?
Well, some of it is, you know, learning the truth in it. The truth in it is that there's always room for me to grow.
Correct.
But there's room for the person thinking about this for me as well to grow. You know, the person that thinks that my faith is diluted, there's room for them to grow as well.
Yes.
And I think there are benefits to both sides. There are benefits to being raised by a Christian family. You know, your foundation, the fundamentals of Christianity are taught by parents who have walked this for many years and can talk to you about struggles. But I think the benefits of deciding at some point consciously, everyone has to decide consciously at some point, even if you were raised in a Christian household, you know. But the radical change of like deciding at some point shows that I thought about it, and there was a motivation spiritually, and there was a choice. It wasn't just that handed over to me by my parents. It was a decision I had to make. It was a difficult decision because people's faith can also be their identity. And sometimes changing faith can feel like a change in identity. So, you know, here's a struggle. Here's a decision I had to make. So, you know, who's anyone to tell me that it wasn't a good enough decision, or that my decision, I've not been working on it enough? It's a relationship between me and God when it comes to it, down to what's important.
And people need to respect that to a good extent. Wow. You and I talk a lot about the Bible. And I want like listeners to jumping on some of those conversations. So how important is like the Bible with all that we know about it, all that we appreciate about it, the problems, the great parts, and everything that we know about it. How has that been a part of your faith formation so far?
Well, it helps that when you're young and just start reading these two texts, they feel so similar. It's so similar, it's confusing why there are differences in the first place. It's like, wait, there's Moses here and there's Musa here. There's, you know, there's Joseph here, there's Yusuf there. All the main characters are here and there. So why the world problem? Why the wars? Why the fight? You know, that's what it feels like when you're young, and just exploring these things for the first time. Especially when you're allowed to explore both. It feels like, why? But you know, that helps, the similarities. But I think understanding the subtle differences is important to making that decision at some point.
Makes sense.
You know, like knowing that Jesus is not only in the Bible, he's also mentioned in the Quran.
Oh my God.
Right?
Yeah.
Like not many people know that. Not many people born in Christianity know that. The fundamental differences is the story that, you know, Jesus died for our sins versus Jesus never died and was just raised to heaven by God. Almost like the story of Enoch in the Quran. That's the version of the Quran. The story of grace is the clear distinction between Bible and Quran. That God sent his son to die for our sins, and he wants a personal connection with us. And yeah, the Quran believes that it's more like a works, almost like a Old Testament. And the Quran also believes that Jesus was not the last to be sent. There was someone else after him. That's another fundamental difference. And that person is Muhammad, who in the Quran is the last prophet. Understanding the subtle differences helps you make your decisions. It also creates a lot more questions sometimes, right?
It does, of course. It should, I should say.
You feel like you've crossed a hurdle and you're like, there's 1,000 more questions left to be answered. So that's that's how I went from reading the Bible, because it starts at being familiar. Like, it sounds like, oh, this feels just like reading the Quran.
Yeah.
And then when you go deeper, you start, finding the subtle differences and why, even though this is subtle, it leads to a grand, distinction between two different world religions. Yeah.
Wow. Is confusion part of your vocabulary? Would you describe your faith ever with a word like confusion?
Oh, like right now?
Yeah, or even like in the past?
Yeah, I would say that. I would say that at some point it was confusing. But over time, it's accepting the mess, accepting the difficulty, and accepting that these are things that happened so many years ago.
Yep.
And I personally believe that there is a gift aspect to it, and there are mysteries that I would never understand. And there are things that I might never be able to show evidence to people. But this partly is the definition of faith. It's like something you have no evidence for.
Right.
Yeah. So.
I think talking about messiness, that's like something that a lot of people don't want to hear, because faith, for many people, faith has to, like, faith and truth, they're synonymous, right? So for them, like, there's this should be some sense of certainty. Right? We should be certain about something. Like, if you're confused, it's not faith. If it's messy, it's not faith. Like, it has to be clean, pure, straightened out, fixed. This sort of like, you get what I mean, right?
I get what you mean.
And you talking about messiness, oh my God, it's like mind-blowing, because I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, last night I was writing a paper on messiness. Like,
okay.
The appreciating messiness when it comes to the Bible.
Yeah.
Because it's not all clean, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, we can still form faith out of it.
Yeah, because we humans, we're messy. There are no rules to define what we're like in the way we think, in our social evolution,
right.
in how things change over time, in how we document things. There are a lot of slight changes that happen, and the changes are important. They're cool too. And I would say that messiness for me is not only in my heart is not only caused by Islam versus Christianity. Even when I became a Christian, another hurdle was that I fell in love with science as a Christian.
Oh my God, yeah.
So it's kind of like, to evolve or not to evolve. Or like...
you Christian who is also a scientist? Please, you want to talk about science and Christianity?
Yeah. And when you become interested in science, and you want to keep doing science, and you're in faith, you have to embrace the messiness.
You have to.
Because... there are things that in my mind don't fit, don't gel. It's not a nice little box packaged together where everything is defined. But I have to, embrace just understanding better as much as possible, because this is why the world is exciting.
That's right.
If there's nothing more to figure out or nothing more to learn, it's just one giant boring...
Oh my God, I like that word too. Boring. So all this while you were talking, I was just thinking about like a list of things that I read about messiness, and one of them is by a guy called Pete Eames. He did his PhD at Harvard. A really brilliant guy. He wrote a book called "The Sin of Certainty," which is like the way people would make an altar for certainty and worship certainty, and certainty is the way for faith. Like, it has to be this, and it's this only. Like, universally, everybody has to accept this, and I'm very certain about this, and that's why my faith is strong, because I'm very convinced about this. And it's like, no. There's people who have like strong faith, people who are really journeying with God, people who are really like exploring their faith. They have to deal with uncertainty. They have to deal with the evolution of faith as a journey, right? Not as like one big event that you grasp in an instant, but it's like something that you journey with, and at some point it evolves, and you believe something and you throw it away, and you take another thing and you believe and you refine it and you keep going. And as you're talking about all of that, I'm like, I'm imagining all of these things in my mind.
Yeah,
because for sure that's what it is. Like, Christianity and science. That's like another huge topic.
Oh, it is. Like, it's a whole different podcast, right?
It is. Yeah.
And yeah, it's something that generates, again, that word, a lot of messiness in my head. And just the being humble about it, the humility that I can't know everything. Yeah. I can just learn a little bit more every day.
Yeah.
And I can garner this amount of knowledge over time, but it's still very, very, very tiny to like what's known about the world and what's not known about the world.
It's a lifetime thing, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate your faith, and I can tell it's a strong faith just by the way you describe it. But let's talk about what we can learn from each other. And by we, I'm talking about people of other faiths, right? We live in a world that is interfaith, whether we like it or not. I'm sure there's a lot of mission efforts out there where like the primary goal of missions is to spread faith. And it's going to be disappointing to people, but I personally don't imagine a world where all of us believe one thing. It's probably a very utopian, idealistic, whatever, imagination that we should give up on. Which is to say, we would always live in society, in community, with people who believe different things, with people who have different faiths. It's been so in history, it is so now, it probably would not change. So what can we learn from each other? And in your specific story, you have a unique perspective. So do you think there are things that Christians can learn from Muslims and Muslims can learn from Christians, and why?
This is a tough question. I think there's a lot to learn from each other, and having these two most popular religion in the world almost causes them to challenge each other and understand a little bit more about each other over time. And this isn't just both big ones challenging each other. Within each religion,
oh my God,
there's also so many sects that also challenge the way that they think about things. And I think what we can learn from each other, why differences are important, is that questioning is important. And to get closer to God, you not only need to accept everything you're being told, but it forces you to ask why. How? Like, and for example, the questions I asked about, like, why do I have to speak Arabic to God all the time? These are questions that people need to ask, and also people need to learn a little bit more about their history. How did their religion come to where it is? The utopian religion that you brought up is what I'm more interested in like kind of tackling a little bit. I don't know what's going to happen about it, but one thing I find it analogous to is language a little bit. Because religion has also spread at the same period as languages did. And I remember asking myself this not so long ago. I was like, are we gonna get to a point one day where we all speak English?
Oh my God.
It's scary to think about. But as many percent of the world that speaks English now, this wasn't true many years ago. Your country and my country, their official language is English, but this wasn't true, I don't know, 70 years ago before independence. And it creates a similar question of, does everyone have to speak the same language as I do to become close to God? I don't know the answer to this question.
For sure.
When it comes to faith. I don't know. But these are two connected topics that...
Brilliant. Oh my God. In the topic of questions, right? Questioning and asking and debating, they are like the most hated words when it comes to religion for most people. Why should you question it? Accept it. Why should you debate it? It's a sin. It's not right. It's a sign of disbelief. It's doubt. Doubt is an enemy to faith, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think you should question it because, this way of thinking might not be like the best, but basically, God gave us free will, and God gave us brain to be able to analyze stuff.
Oh my God! Yeah,
understand stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to use it.
Yeah.
And faith is about, accepting God as a person, as, getting a good relationship with God. But I think that your faith shouldn't just, plateau the way it started. It should grow.
Yeah.
And for it to grow, you need to ask questions.
Yeah.
You need to ask, what's about this, Bible did I not understand before?
Yeah.
Are the years, have people really existed for this long?
Yeah.
Questions like that.
Yeah.
And I heard you mention last time the story of languages on the tower, and I found that very exciting because I was like, okay, I'm glad to know that maybe it was a story that was passed down from generation to generation within the Jewish culture. But yeah, that as well is something important to question.
Yeah.
It's like, so did we used to live in a utopian world where everyone spoke one, and then was it a catastrophic event that led to speaking many, or was it gradual? These are questions that it's important for us to just even know how the word around us work.
Yeah, and even for faith, right? It's important. Like the entirety, I can think of so many sections of the Bible that exist because of questions. Right? Like almost all of the 14, 15, whatever, depending on what you think about the epistles of Paul, they all almost evolved and came about because of questions that people were asking, right? So the questions, debates, brainstorming things, having heated conversations, it's always been a part of faith, and it's actually been a good thing. It's actually added to faith more than passive acceptance and whatever in the name of belief.
Yeah. Would it be wrong to say almost every book after Acts that really reform or inform how Christianity is right now came from questions?
Oh yeah, it is solving a problem.
Because it was Paul answering questions.
Yeah, Paul answering questions. Should we eat food that has been given to our idols? No. How should we marry? Okay, what if the younger ones in the church are behaving a certain way? How should we respond? Okay, these people speak in tongues. These people don't speak in tongues. How do we make sense of that? And it's all questions over questions over questions. Trials, tribulations, troubles. The Romans are persecuting us. How should we behave? Okay, taxes. What should we do? What about tithe and offering? Okay, communion. Is it food? Should we drink it? Should we eat it? Should we whatever? It's all questions. It's all questions.
Yeah. So. And I we can't mention it without mentioning one of the questions that was most important to me, which is I think it was in Ephesians, the question of are Jews the only ones that are allowed to be Christians?
Oh my God, yeah.
Right? Which kind of basically answers many of the things we talked about today.
Yes. Yes.
and was probably a huge step to Christianity being the way it is right now.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to what we're talking about languages. Yeah. It's like this section of people are not the only one that have access to God. And if that never came up, maybe it wouldn't be the way it is right now. Because Gentiles, you and me, would be like, well, this is not meant for us.
Yeah. It didn't begin with us, and it's a big thing, Gentile Jewish relationship. In fact, the Apostle Paul, his entire ministry was built upon this big question, and he spent a lot of time after all of his missionary journeys advocating for Gentiles, making a point to show to his colleagues that God had indeed welcomed Gentiles into the faith, and he has several signs and wonders to confirm that, and he advocated for them severally, for this. And it's all in the book. It's all right there. So I say all of that to just echo the importance of the point that you mentioned, that questioning and questions and thinking out loud and debating things is all part of faith formation. And we the earlier we accept it and include that, the better it is for our own development, spiritually, I mean. Nice. Okay, let's wrap it up all here, with all these wonderful conversations, starting from your faith journey and the place of the Bible and all of that. Let's wrap it up here with what from where you sit, right? What benefit, what comment, what advice, what is that burning thing that you want to share with people out there listening to conversations about interfaith relationships?
I think it's important to continue to challenge your faith.
Yeah.
And I think even after the decision of staying in your faith, whether your goal is to bring everyone to this blessing that you've experienced or not, you should learn about theirs as well.
Yeah.
And just learning about others can allow us to have a semblance of of a cordial a good community where there aren't too many stereotypes, violence,
oh my God,
or things like that.
Yeah.
So I know that evangelism is important to Christianity. I don't think it's only important to Christianity, it's important to Islam as well. If not, we wouldn't have as many people as we have in both religions. But like not allowing the need to although it's important, not allowing that to blind us to the importance of being our brother's keeper. Right. I think that's like an important message to have. I would never discourage evangelism or discourage you talking about your faith, but it should be approached from a this here is something that I found and it benefits me so much, and I just can't wait to share it with someone that I love, as opposed to just a mission of conversion. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Evangelism. Oh my God. Yeah. It's always a very sensitive thing to talk about when we talk about interfaith relationships, because it seems as though evangelism is another way of patronizing people's faith and proselytizing, and it has this the histories of it has this imperial backing, and has a little bit of colonization eating up
absolutely a lot
of it, and people don't want to hear that because it's just a simplified version of all of this giant strokes of problematic things. But the way you said it is very generous and graceful, in the sense that I'm not going to discourage you from doing it, but do it from a perspective where it's sort of respectful of other people's faith.
And also listen to their evangelism, right? Because when you go thinking this is the best thing that's ever happened to me, also go with the awareness that they probably have something in them that they think is the best thing that's ever happened to them as well. And then this is how you challenge yourself, and you probably come out stronger in your own belief after that challenge.
My God. I appreciate you so much, Afeez. Would you mind ending by telling us what your name means? Your name came up in the thing, and I wanted to ask you, but I forgot. What is it? It doesn't seem apparent to me that it's a Muslim name. What does it mean?
Afeez is an Arabic name. It's like many of the Arabic names that start with Abdul. So it would be Abdul Afeez.
Okay.
Or Abdul meaning servants, and Afeez meaning preserver. So servants of the preserver. Servants of the God that preserves.
Nice.
or protects.
This is a sign that I need to take Arabic seriously. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been a fascinating conversation on a beautiful Saturday morning in our little study space here in our apartment.
Thank you so much for
sharing wonderful stories with us. It's been a blessing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paul. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay, listeners, we'll see you in another podcast coming up shortly, wherever you get your podcast. All the best. See you.